feel like the Marner, he'd had a reputation for letting down in the playoffs. Where would you place the line on the split? Percentage of fans that wanted him back versus accepted he was going to go versus are glad he's gone. A hometown kid who dreamed of playing for the Leafs and succeeding for the Leafs, and of course it's over now. So where does everybody kind of fall in?
Yeah, it's interesting. Mitch Marner, he's a very talented player. I think everybody in Toronto knows that. Everyone who watches the game of hockey knows that Mitch Marner is an uber talented player, and he's going to go off and he's going to do good things in Vegas. I mean, the guy had 100 points this year for the first time in his career. He'd been, scratching the surface of 100, finally broke through that threshold this season. But as you noted, it's the postseason failures that really is what kind of has always stuck in the back of the minds of a lot of Leaf fans. So there's a lot of people who just wanted to see change of some kind in Toronto. Like, you get 9 years of this core of this Marner, Matthews, Nylander group, and it's 9 years of failure. They made the postseason every year, but only had 2 playoff series victories. And both of them, they won round 1 and then didn't really give much of a fight in round 2. So it really, really, really has, set a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths here. If I'm giving out percentages, I think more people are glad he's gone, I guess you could say. Not just that he's gone, but that there is change. Like, I would say probably 75% of the people here in Toronto are like, okay, we needed change. It was Marner's turn just because his contract was due. The Leafs didn't have to have any say, or the player didn't really have any say. It was just time to allow him to go via free agency and go on to possibly greener pastures. We'll see what happens with him. But I would say probably 75% of the people here glad that he's gone. But there is a section of Leaf fans, for sure, that believe that the Leafs made a bad mistake, that they believe that how could you possibly let a 100-point Selke candidate walk out the door, and really all you get in return is Nicolas Waugh. Good player, he'll be a good depth piece for the Maple Leafs, but he's no Mitch Marner, and you'd be silly to think that he is. And even they made a trade for Matthias Michelli out of Utah. He's also not going to be Mitch Marner. They're not going to replace Mitch Marner. It's just not possible. So there are a lot of people that look at it and say, how does this team get better? How do they possibly get over the hump? They could barely win playoff series with that guy in their lineup. How could they possibly get it done without him? So there is definitely a split, but I would say Leafs Nation probably more so on the, okay, fresh start, new identity type of wave, and welcome the change.
Is there a frustration that he ends up walking for? You mentioned they get Waugh back in the sign-and trade, but that they didn't move on this earlier or tried to move him last summer, 2 summers ago, during the year. Although aren't there reports that or rumors that maybe they did try to move him at the deadline and get something substantial back in return?
Yeah, like there was a report that came out last summer, and somehow Vegas has always been involved in these deals, and lo and behold, that's where he ends up. But last summer there was a report that there was some interest in Marner maybe wanting to go to Vegas, so they explored that, and Vegas was reportedly unwilling to give up Shea Theodore. So those talks kind of stalled out. And then it got revisited again in the middle of the season around the trade deadline, where it became apparent that Marner wanted to take this thing to the distance, was unwilling to sign an extension, and Brad Treliving wanted to try and get something out of it. And there was that reported 3-way trade with Carolina and Rantanen coming to Toronto and signing an extension here, Marner going to Vegas, doing his extension, and then we don't know what was supposed to go to Carolina. That part of the trade never got materialized, so that trade fell through. So there were multiple times where this team had tried to move Marner or approach Marner about it, but he has a full no-move clause, full no-trade, full no-move. So whatever deal the Maple Leafs wanted to do for him, he had to sign off on it. And unfortunately, life happens, and his wife was about 6-7 months pregnant at the time of the trade deadline, and I'm sure most people could sympathize with the fact that he didn't want to pick up and leave in the middle of the season, knowing that, his wife was a couple of months away, probably wanted to be close to family for when that happened. And now that, the baby's here, wife is okay, they look forward and say, hey, we can start a new life in Vegas. Let's sign a nice 8-year contract, get that sign and trade done, and move on and kind of turn the page on Toronto and start a new life in Vegas.
Speaking with Michael Distefano, TSN 1050 on the Leafs. Is there, Joe, how many times have we flirted with this idea? Like the Leafs and the Bills as kindred spirits right now? Really, really good and hitting their head on the same thing every time, whether it used to be the first round for the Leafs, and then it got to be the second round. And here they are, Florida is a dynasty. They took Florida 7 games,
Yeah.
They had a lead in game 3, up 2 games to none.
That's what I was gonna say.
Am I supposed to treat them like they need huge changes, or is it just modest tinkering? In this case, like Marner is the Diggs move. Some will be big ones, but for the most part, things should be viewed as pretty good.
Yeah, it's interesting. They certainly did take Florida to the distance. They took them to 7 games. If you look at it in a vacuum, no other team was able to do that. So you can look at it and say, hey, Toronto might be, the next best team in the NHL because they took the standard 2-7 games. They had them on the ropes, up 2-0, and up 3-1 in the third period in Game 3. Had a chance to go up 3-0 in overtime. Yeah, you can look at all that. But at the end of the day, they still lost. And when you look at the performance of the Maple Leafs in games 5 and 7 specifically on home ice, in which they got booed off their ice on both of those games, you could see how far they actually are from the Florida Panthers. Like, once Florida kind of figured things out, it was game over. They absolutely ran the show in that series, winning, the last, the last few games there. They just absolutely ran show. And I think that's kind of what sticks in your head. Not as much, when the Leafs up 2-0, up 3-1 in Game 3, chance to take the lead. That seems like so long ago. What lives in the back of your mind was, holy cow, they got absolutely jobbed on home ice in Game 5, lost 6-1, and then did the exact same thing in Game 7 and lost 6-1 to the Florida Panthers. This team's not relatively close. There's more than just tinkering to be done. And what Brad Treliving said in his end-of-season press conference is, you can have all the skill in the world, but look, at the end of the day, this team probably needs a bit of a DNA change. And Marner is a big part of this team's DNA. So by moving on from him, that's kind of the start of that. Now they brought back John Tavares, so they still have 3 of those big 4, core 4 players. So can you really change the DNA of your team by moving out just one guy? Well, I guess we'll see. And there's still the rest of the summer to figure out what else they do with that roster. It could be a couple more players. The trade market could be lively. We're hearing throughout the rest of the summer. Maybe a couple of guys end up out the door. And at the end of the day, there will be 3, 4, 5 players that we see turned over from last year that could potentially move forward into changing this team's DNA.
Is there any residual anger towards Vegas for potentially tampering with Marner here for a long time?
Like within the fan base?
Yeah. Within the, because you said like everyone's kind of accepted or maybe even is happy he's gone, and they end up getting Wah back, maybe in part so that there isn't any further process there. But still, like Jeremy in the beginning there is like how Vegas does things. They're so aggressive. And maybe sometimes that's so aggressive is that everyone tampers to some extent, but it does feel like Vegas maybe goes further than every other team does.
Well, yeah, I guess there's a little bit of that, especially when you listen to Mitch Marner's introductory press conference, and he was chatting with Mark Stone, when they were at and Shea Theodore when they were at the Four Nations Cup, just kind of picking their brain. Hey, how's Vegas? It might be a landing spot this summer, and they had glowing things to say. And then, even this summer when he was debating, all right, what do I do? And he was asking Ryan Reeves and Max Pacioretty, his current Leaf teammates, hey, what's Vegas like? How'd you like the community, the school systems, and all that? And they had nothing but good things to say, apparently. I don't get all up in arms about the tampering myself. Like, sure, there's a segment of fans who obviously don't like it and would love to see some sort of repercussions. Apparently the league is looking to make an example of some team, but, like, you know, we're not naive. This stuff is happening all the time. And good on the Leafs for, like, extorting Vegas and basically being like, give us a good player and we won't say anything and this can kind of go away unless the league does something. But we won't file for tampering charges. Like, this happens all the time, guy. We know that. So there's nothing for me to be really upset about, regardless if, you know, Vegas was in there getting in his ear. I think Marner, for the last year or two, even he said in his intro press conference, has been kind of eyeing Vegas. So whether they had to put the bug in his ear or not, I think that he was gearing up to go there.
Quickly before we let you go, so the Blue Jays 3 wins in a row against the Yankees and are now tied for first in the AL East. How stunning is this season so far for them?
No, if you would have told me back on May 1st that we'd be sitting here coming off Canada Day weekend, heading into July 4th weekend, and the Blue Jays were going to be atop of the AL East standings with the Yankees, I would have said, no, you're nuts. Absolutely nuts. It was a team that could not hit. The power numbers weren't there. They were dead last in home runs in the first month of the league. Their runners in scoring position, they weren't able to get guys across the plate. And, you know, the pitching was decent but inconsistent. The bullpen, you know, was starting to kind of get worked on and was wearing thin. And all of a sudden, they have been world beaters. And I think it was May 28th, the Blue Jays were 8 games back at the Yankees. And on that day, Bo Bichette, the game was tied 0-0. They were in Texas. Bo Bichette hits a pinch hit 9th-inning home run. And since then, they've been pretty well the best team in baseball, best offense in baseball. I think they're 21-10 since. They've erased that 8-game lead. You got Alejandro Kirk looking like his old self again, all-star. He's hitting the ball all over the place. You got this Addison Barger kid who's kind of come out of nowhere. I'm sure people in Buffalo have been watching him for the last couple of years with the Bisons, but he's really making a statement up here. A guy like Ernie Clement hitting. You're having a big resurgence from George Springer. I haven't even mentioned Vlad Guerrero Jr., the $500 million man, having another great season himself. So, yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and it's been a tough couple of years for a lot of Jays fans. It's been tough summers, that's for sure. But, this year, just what they've been able to do, this turnaround over the course of the last month, it's been very exciting. And I think a lot of people here in Toronto are really excited to see what the rest of the summer brings for them.
Thanks very much, Mike. We'll talk in the future.
No Jake Paul talk, huh?
I'll text you about. We're both big boxing guys.
Go for it. What do you want?
He got ranked yesterday, so he's now eligible for title shots, which I think Mike means he's entering. You don't think he's going to fight real boxers now?
Who has he fought to earn that ranking? Nobody.
He's fought former UFC guys.
Former UFC guys and 50-year-old former pro boxers. The guy right behind him, this American kid, he's 20-0 with 20 knockouts. How could you possibly have any credibility if that's what your ranking system? We'll get into it later, Joe.
Yeah, we will. I just farces. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that is the word. He's ranked 14th though. I'm not going to go too up in arms about it, I guess.
Yeah.
If they ranked him in the top 5 or something, then I would be, losing my mind probably.
That'd be ridiculous. But shout out to my boy, Lucas Body, right across the border from you guys, Niagara Falls kid, ranked in the top 5 for his category in the new ranking. So shout out to him. Hopefully he can get a title fight soon.
Cool.
Very nice.
Thanks, Mike. We'll talk soon.
See you guys.
Michael Distefano, TSN 1050, and Locked On Leafs.